For a change, it is 11:30 a.m. And I see a few folks are joining in as we begin. So how I would like to get started is with a very brief introduction of EMR Approved and the Format Pro Network so that folks understand why we created the Learning Lunch series and the topics that we attempt to address for our audience. The Learning Lunch series was created originally as a way to help our website visitors for EMRapproved.com and the consultants and participants in our Format Pro network become more familiar with topics that are pressing from the perspective of our client community. My primary business here in the Illinois area is a consultant group that targets, or rather works with, medical communities specifically for the purpose of helping them with their electronic medical record projects, both from an implementation standpoint, through an optimization, and into a long-term maintenance, and helping those clients and practices and clinics utilize that EMR to the best of their ability. That said, one of the things that as a consultant my group has identified as extremely important to making that EMR project successful at all phases of the project is the identification of an in-house practice champion, someone within the practice or medical environment, clinic, hospital, who is responsible for the day-to-day operations of that EMR. So from our perspective as consultants in this space, we have identified the subject of champion as quite critical to the success of an EMR project. This is going to be, as I mentioned, the person or persons on site who are able to both, to begin the project if possible. So if you can identify a practice champion prior to implementation of your EMR project, that of course is optimal. However, many folks may be coming to this event or to this presentation with the intent to identify a champion after they have gone live with their EMR, and in which case that is still an important step. If you have not identified somebody on the front end, you certainly want to do it midstream or after the fact in order to make sure that it continues to run smoothly. The tricky thing with the electronic medical record and health record in your environment is that it touches every aspect of your practice. Some folks say, oh, it's just a piece of software. It's only as important as the computer has been in the past for my practice. That's not at all true. One of the reasons that the government, I think, has invested in streamlining or expediting the implementation of medical records in the medical environments is because there are benefits that we are beginning to see, certainly as consultants, in the documentation, in the improvement in overall patient care. Clearly, there are a lot of industry arguments on this topic, but the truth of the matter is, regardless of your position on the topic of EMR, it's at this point one of those necessary evils, if you will. So if you're not feeling 100% confident regarding your implementation or your go live on the EMR, hopefully it will grow on you over time. It definitely, the many clients that we have worked with here in Central Illinois have started out a little rocky in their expectations of the EMR and have worked toward an appreciation for the technology. Regardless, all of the sites that we work with and all of the sites that we consult with, within those sites we have recommended and counseled our clients to identify this champion role, somebody for this champion role. So this, again, is a person who's going to manage and maintain daily operations. It is going to be your go-to person for your staff to route their questions or come up with suggestions regarding that EMR experience on your site. This should also be a person that you identify who can be, and I use the word cheerleader loosely, but this is the person that you're going to want to help spearhead a positive spin on this EMR in your environment. Again, because it touches every aspect of what you do in the medical environment. It's going to touch your patient care, your check-in, your workflow at every level. So you're going to want somebody in-house, somebody within your site who can wrap their arms around it completely and address it from a management standpoint. So the question is, why do you do this? Why do we, as a consultant company, why do we recommend that you pinpoint a champion in your practice? Well, I think this image that we have embedded here probably is a good indication. At the beginning of any medical record project, particularly if you're moving from a paper environment, but even if you're moving from a legacy system that was perhaps utilized strictly for billing or strictly for patient charts, you're going to find that a true certified solution that will qualify you for meaningful use and that will be a real asset to your environment may create some confusion on the front end, may engage your staff in a period of, let's say, overload, if you will. So there is going to be a culture change at the beginning of an EMR project. I apologize for those of you who are already mid-project or post-implementation. We may address a couple of launch components here, but there are some culture changes that happen. There's some core confusion. Any of you that have more than one staff person will be able to relate to the fact that there are going to be folks who are not technically competent or rather technically comfortable and are going to be overwhelmed. We have the issue of identifying problems and troubleshooting when there's a limited technology capability within the group. There's a familiarity with the geek speak we call in the IT industry, the technology folks who will speak to you in a language that you're not familiar with from a technology standpoint. There can be a learning lag. If you train your first few staff people in this new medical record solution or health record solution, and some people were still tasked on those days with patient care, which of course you would be because that is your primary business, there could be a learning lag within the staff. Some folks, either different learning styles or they didn't get, they weren't fully involved in the initial training, that sort of thing. Finger pointing happens quite a bit, and I'll address this a couple of different times in different ways throughout this presentation. What I mean by finger pointing is that in what we find with our clients, particularly in the early phases of their medical record implementation and such, is depending on how many cooks you have in your kitchen, how many people within your practice are interacting with your EMR and how many are interacting with the vendors and support people, you find that there becomes a community or a period of finger pointing, meaning that the staff that you're working with might point the finger at the vendors and say the problem is all their fault, and the vendors might point at your IT company who has created your infrastructure with your computer hardware and things and say that the blame falls on them, and then that IT company might point right back at your users and say it's a user learning issue, and that can be very difficult in terms of communication challenges for the practice. There can be a lot of staff pushback. As I mentioned, you may have a technology lag in terms of a technology limitation in terms of your current staffing. Obviously, people that work in a medical environment are not necessarily technically skilled people from a computer knowledge standpoint. That is fully understandable given that they studied medicine for a reason. So you may get a little pushback from the staff if they're accustomed to using paper charts or if they had figured out a way to easily navigate your old legacy system. A new EMR might be challenging for them, and they might give you a little communicative pushback. Fractured focus, what we mean by that is that you are going to encounter a lot of changes with an EMR implementation in your environment, and it can be difficult without a practice champion specifically, it can be difficult and disorienting to wrap your arms, or have everybody, I should say, wrap their arms around this medical record project. And you want to identify or pinpoint a champion in your practice or in your environment so that you have a more rapid response time, a quicker contact to get your problem solved. The more you carve out this champion role, empower this champion role, train this champion on your site, the quicker your response time will be, and the more efficient your support environment will be around this medical record. So what is the process? So what we came here today to talk about was how we create a process of identifying and educating and engaging this champion in the practice. First thing you need to do, of course, is outline or identify a best candidate. Who within your current employment environment is going to be a good candidate for this role? And then how do you empower that person or those people? How do you prioritize what they need to do to get up to speed? And then how do you outline what you expect of them? All of those things critically important to getting this role up and running. Most important part, identifying the best candidate. And I put an S on the end of that because other than a very small practice environment, you're going to want to identify not only a primary practice champion, but someone I'm going to call the understudy, or a secondary practice champion as well. If you have a relatively large environment, you may actually want to create a team. What you're looking for in this candidate, and we know because we've had to help practices and clinics and hospitals select this candidate, we know that the very first thing that you're going to look for are basic computer capabilities. Now this sounds like a no-brainer, clearly, but you would be surprised at how many environments we come into with the person that they have identified as their go-to person for the EMR. That person has very little technical capability, if any at all. And so one of the things you want to qualify for right from the get-go is that basic computer capability. Does this person cry when you ask her to type something? Does he push back when you request assistance getting to an online website? That is not the person that you want to outline. And it's interesting because you might be surprised. The person that you think would be the best candidate may or may not be the right person, because it does require a lot of different skill sets and strengths. So computer capability is one. They don't have to be a rocket scientist, a technical specialist. As long as they have a good familiarity with computer hardware and basic understanding of computer software, that's going to be a great place to start. The second thing you're going to want to think about are the strong communication skills. We all have staff people who are very, very good at communicating with other staff folks, communicating on the telephone, communicating with vendors, communicating with pharmaceutical reps. That person, you want to put that person close to the top of the list. If they have some basic computer skills and they have strong communication skills, that person should go to the top of your list. Is this person a quick learner and a self-starter? These sound, again, like maybe very basic requirements of any employee, but the reason I include them is because I am shocked regularly when I go on site to some of our clients to find that the person that they've identified as their practice champion is somebody that is not comfortable in a myriad of different learning environments or requires a lot of management to get going on a project. You want somebody who's very quick in a learning environment and able to get going on their own self-motivation. You want this person to be patient and positive. You want the person in your practice who comes in every day or most days with a smile on their face. Somebody, when a patient comes in and has a complaint or a concern, speaks to them slowly and carefully and with a lot of sympathy. The tricky thing about the practice champion role is that you're gonna have to learn as the champion and then translate what you've learned to the rest of the staff. If you don't have a level of patience and positivity in your presentation, then the rest of the staff people are not going to respond to your delivery. Tech translation skills, that kind of plays into that basic computer capability. If the person you are identifying as your practice champion does not know the difference between a router and a tablet, doesn't have that, sort of basic technical knowledge, they're not going to be able to translate this information very well to your non-technical staff. So you want to make sure, again, this is part of that first step, you want to make sure they have rather basic computer capabilities and skills. You want this person to also be aware of your internal organizational roles. So nobody knows your practice better than the people that work for you. That's why, although you are paying folks from the vendor site, paying folks from the IT company, although you are engaging a lot of outside support for this electronic medical record to get it up and running and to continue maintaining it, only the people within your practice are going to make those direct connections to the correct organizational roles. So when training is delivered to your staff, understanding which parts of the EMR are applicable to those individuals will be really beneficial in making sure that that learning is efficient. You also want somebody, if possible, with some project management experience, because this person, as we get into outlining the duties, this person is going to need to lay out a training schedule, to frame out a support team and a support plan. So a little project management experience is a good thing as well. Some training experience, this goes back to the patient and positive skill set. If this person has some experience training others in your environment, if you've identified them as the person that you can point to teach operations to a new employee, sort of basic skill sets, then that might be a good person to put on this checklist as well. And then if by any chance, and this is not always true, and the reason I say optional is because you don't always have somebody in your environment that already has EMR experience, partly because the whole EMR push from the government is relatively new. But if you do have somebody with some existing or a pre-existing EMR experience, that is a good person also to think about for this role. The next thing that you want to do in preparing for this identification of a champion is to empower them. So selecting them is one thing, empowering them is another. Some folks feel like selecting is enough. They pick the person, they give them a list of trainings that they need to go to, and they go back to their patient care. Certainly those are steps that you need to take. However, from a management standpoint, what we find is that if the manager or owner of the practice or environment engages in a positive promotion of this new champion or champions identified, that helps the rest of the staff to both respect these folks coming in this role and also to pay attention to them. If they understand that the manager owner is behind this principle of identifying a champion and is supporting this role, then you absolutely will have a more positive uptake from the staff themselves. Make sure that you are encouraging that champion in advance to get as much preparatory work under their belt as possible. And we'll talk a little bit about those duties as we move on here. You want to encourage the rest of the staff to ask questions as you outline this role. Find out from the staff what their concerns are, what their worries are about launching the EMR project. Or if you're already live with your EMR, now is the time as you launch this practice champion to have them ask questions about what they can expect from the person placed in this role. Also make sure that you are appointing an understudy for this champion, at least one, and in a larger environment I recommend several, or I even recommend creating a team. Make sure that you identify, using that same checklist, identify an understudy to your primary champion, or create a small team if you're a large environment. Consider an incentive program. We have implemented this in several sites, and this has been very effective. If you can come up with an incentive program for both the champion group and the staff to create and follow the guidelines that are implemented by the champion and by this role, and by incentive, you can come up with any number of things. What several practices have done has revolved around time off, long lunches, free lunches, things of that nature to help incent them to continue their training, for instance, to engage at a high level with the champion, to help outline the training programs, those kinds of things. Another thing that you can do is to seek out a mentor for your champion. So if you are creating or identifying a champion for the first time and you have other facilities that you are referring to or familiar with or engaged in a relationship with that have an EMR already in place and have somebody that they would identify as their champion, this is a great way to get your new champion up to speed on what the challenges and issues might be in their upcoming role. Partner them up, have them schedule some time together, and create a mentor relationship. Research supplemental support options and augment the staff with those support options as needed. There are alternatives out there to vendor support, which can sometimes be overwhelmed, hospital support, which can sometimes be overwhelmed if you're an owned hospital practice. The hospitals themselves have IT departments that can be overwhelmed with their primary requests. We are, all businesses have limitations in what they can manage from a professional standpoint. It's good to have some information regarding supplemental support and supplemental training options and the ability to augment or add to your staffing as needed. Those are important options as well. We will talk a little bit more about how you can engage that down the road here. I'm going to say this multiple times throughout this presentation. Training is key. When you identify a practice champion, the primary thing that you can do to empower them is prioritize their training. What a lot of practices try to do when they first implement the EMR is either limit the training or in some way embed the training or work the training around their regular workday. I'm not saying that we don't want you to engage in patient care. Obviously, we want you to do that. That is your primary area of business. However, if you do not highlight and prioritize training for your champion or champions, none of the rest of it will be worthwhile at all, including the implementation of your EMR. Don't try to save money on the training step for your EMR. If you've engaged with a vendor solution, make sure you find out what the absolute ultimate training capability is from that vendor from the get-go. If you're already live, if you've already hired and released your training from the vendor, there are alternatives and there are ways to increase and improve upon that training. Whoever you identify as this champion will need the highest level of vendor training available, absolutely. And you want to encourage them and empower them with that requirement. You also want to create expanded staff training and have this practice champion, once they are fully versed in the program, create an expanded staff training calendar. I use the silly phrase rinse and repeat because you never want to stop training. One of the reasons you outline a champion is that ongoing training is critical to best utilization of that medical record in your environment. So you're wanting to create an expanded staff training calendar and continue to train throughout the life of your practice, throughout the life of that medical record in your environment. And then, additionally, you want to identify some post-implementation training and support options. There are several directions that you can take. You can engage in additional training from your vendor if they have that available. You can hire outside training service companies to come in and do additional post-implementation training on site or online. We have those options. And although you have multiple support touch points for your medical record, you want to make sure that you have a backup to those solutions when and if it's needed. Once you've identified the champion and you feel like you've empowered the role and you've gotten them started and ready to go, it is now time to outline the duties for that champion. If you are on this presentation today and if you are planning to become a practice champion yourself, this portion of the presentation is also relevant to you. From this point forward, we are going to be talking about what those champion duties ought to be. The first thing that you want to do from the perspective of a practice champion or a medical environment champion for the EMR is to figure out how to address the many challenges of an EMR on your site. To avoid the common pitfalls that accompany the relationship between medical staff and their medical record. Encourage success among the staff folks that you are. Detailed system for support. Learn to document the issues and be the touch point to affect positive change through the use of this medical record. The first thing that you're going to be tasked with as champion, whether you're coming in post-implementation or on the front end of the project, to deal with staff pushback and negativity. Now, this doesn't happen at every single site location, but I'll tell you it's a pretty high propensity for staff to feel threatened by new technology, to feel sidelined by new technology, to worry that it may impact their position in practice. And so what you can find early on as a practice champion is that you're going to have some staff pushback and negativity. You're going to need to address that right away. You're going to have real job arguments. I put the quotes because what you're going to hear is, hey, this is taking up so much time, I can't do my real job. I need to be able to do a real job. And I need to be able to take care of patients. And I need to be able to do the tasks that were assigned to me when I was hired at this job. And they are right. They're absolutely right. This role, this learning of the EMR and utilizing the EMR and managing the use of the EMR can get in the way, particularly in the early phases, can get in the way of their real job. So you're going to need to address that challenge by doing your best as practice champion to put your arms around the parts that are difficult for others and help carve out the pieces that are specifically related to their job duties and make sure that they are as attentive to those and as skilled at those as possible. Technology limitations, you are going to have staff people who are not technically competent, that are not technically comfortable. Those are the folks that you're going to need to run interference for regularly. That is an absolute challenge. Work culture issues, if this is an environment that is accustomed to paper, if this is an environment that is accustomed to working without a lot of oversight and accountability, you're going to bump up against work culture issues. The practice champion can sometimes be misidentified as, let's say, a crossing guard or a hall monitor, somebody who's constantly pressing people to train and learn and get up to speed, and sometimes that can take on a negative connotation. As the practice champion, or as your identified practice champion, this person wants to make sure that they are familiar with the work culture and attempts to work around that culture in order to implement their training schedules and other issues. The staff is going to have frustrations, particularly those with technical limitation, around the tech talk and geek speak that can happen. There are going to be some issues around troubleshooting problems. If there are, keep in mind that there are multiple touch points for this EMR in this environment. You've got printers and scanners and routers and modems and sometimes servers, and in addition to the software, and it's sometimes difficult to know which thing is causing the problem. learning as a practice champion how to identify and drill down to what those problems are, big part of addressing those challenges. Power struggles, sometimes when a practice champion is identified, what we find is that there are concerns about that person taking on a leadership role. People can feel diminished in their role because somebody else was identified as a practice champion. So you can experience a brief period generally of power struggle. And then anger management. This one should probably be in capital letters. Everybody gets angry at their EMR at some point. I have yet to go into a practice environment where everybody in the environment has said to me, I've never been angry because the EMR was frustrating to me, either from a launch or learning or ongoing or maintenance standpoint. Generally, there's some anger around it. Not always the fault of the program or even the support. It is often the fault of the technical limitations within that staff person or the communication that's happening among the staff. So these are the several challenges that a practice champion can both address and manage. Common pitfalls in this EMR universe include backlogs in training, stagnation in learning. What I mean by that is we are engaged in constant training to keep up to speed on this medical record solution in our environment. If we allow that to stagnate, if we go back to business as usual and we don't continue training, then we can certainly get into trouble. This is something that the practice champion can address from the very beginning. Learning to keep that training on schedule, learning to keep folks up to speed on what's happening. The other thing that can happen is if folks do not learn along the way to operate the EMR in the best way that is most efficient for the practice or the environment, they can start to create something we call workarounds. If you guys are up and running already, there are probably a few of you that are already experiencing this. You can't figure out how the EMR communicates with email to patients, so you go out to Gmail and you send that patient an email from your free Gmail account. The problem with workarounds, besides the fact that it is not a very efficient use of your very expensive EMR, is that it can be damaging to the professionalism of your practice, and it can be dangerous. You could actually breach the HIPAA legislation and create an audit situation for your practice. So you want to be careful about creating workarounds. That is a place where the practice champion can be really integral in helping to solve that workaround issue. Blocking workflow adjustments is a common pitfall. Folks don't always want to change their workflow when they bring a medical record tool in. They want it to work exactly like their paper charts do. In some cases, you can retrofit your EMR to work a little bit more like your paper flow, but not always. And there will be some need for adjustment. If you block those adjustments, if that environment blocks those adjustments, and if the practice champion doesn't address that, that can be a major pitfall. We talked a little bit ago about playing the blame game, pointing fingers. The vendor points at the IT points at the users. You want to avoid that, and one of the ways you can avoid it is by educating your practice champion and utilizing that person as a go-between with all of those vendors and all of those touch points, the person that's going to create the high-level communication to make sure that that doesn't happen. And the other major pitfall is not planning ahead for downtime. That is one of the primary reasons that we use a practice champion. That person is going to have the best idea and the best ideas internally for planning ahead should that EMR go down temporarily. If your internet is out and you're using a cloud solution, if your server goes down for 20 minutes or an hour because it's running an update in the middle of your day and it was unexpected, these are times at which having that practice champion to help frame out how you handle that downtime is really, really critical. The other thing the practice champion will do is encourage success in the utilization of that EMR in your environment. They're going to create a system for and allow for adequate training of your staff, create a learning calendar so that everybody in the group is up to speed as they need to be, keeping up with the changes that happen. This is the person who is going to connect with the vendor and stay abreast of the changes in your solution, in your environment. They're going to help build a team within your practice or environment that is able to answer questions as they learn at a higher level than the folks who are new to the practice or the folks who are new to the solution in your environment. They're going to take advantage of user groups and user conferences. The practice champion should be the person that you target to engage in conversations with other user groups for your solution, and that you put on an airplane and send out for a Friday, Saturday, Sunday to engage in the user conferences provided by the vendor to understand, bring a whole list of questions from your staff and engage your staff in participation. And you also, or rather they also want to encourage success by making sure that they have that backup support and augmented help as needed for that solution. The main thing that I encourage the practice champions to do, both in my education program and in my client site locations, is to establish support relationships. I can't stress this enough. If you, as a practice champion, engage with the vendor at a high level to identify the folks in that vendor relationship that are the best communicators for you, that is a terrific way to create a support system. The support of the EMR is why the practice champion exists. This is the person that all requests will be routed through and routed to in response from those various vendor touch points. The staff can talk to the practice champion to ask questions, to troubleshoot a problem, to get some additional training and guidance. The vendors can talk to the practice champion in a language that they both understand to solve problems, troubleshoot issues, identify training points. All of those things can be routed through this knowledgeable practice champion to help facilitate better utilization of the EMR. You want to, as a champion, you want to state clear time parameters, both for the staff people and for the vendors. You want to identify a single extension on your site for a reply. I can't tell you how many times we, as a technology support company, will call one of our clients and we get a voicemail, which is true in most clinical environments, that says, "Hi, this is Dr. So-and-so's office," or "Hi, this is the endoscopy clinic. Please press this extension for this person and that extension for that person, or if you wish to reach the operator," etc. The problem with that is, from a technical support standpoint, you have no idea which one of these people you're supposed to press the button for unless you have an identified practice champion. If you have a single extension for a reply, if in your relationship with this vendor, you've identified clear parameters for the times that you can be reached, the extension that you can be reached at, etc., this cuts down on the back and forth and go-between conversations that happen and that cause frustration between your EMR solution providers and the practice. Identifying alternate support options. None of us like to have one place to call with a problem, because if we don't get an immediate response, we want a backup solution. Make sure that you have a list of alternative support options for that situation. So, for instance, my son is 12 years old now, so he started babysitting himself. But once upon a time, if I wanted to go out, I needed to call a babysitter. If I couldn't get the first person on my list, I had 3 other people to choose from. I hate to make the relationship between vendor support for EMR and babysitters, but sometimes that's what it feels like. And you want to make sure that you have more than one person to call. If you are only calling the vendor or the hospital IT department, for instance, for support, make sure you have 1 or 2 or 3 names of people at that site that you can connect with that may be able to help. But also have at your disposal an alternative solution, somebody else to call, a different practice who's using the same EMR, somebody in that practice champion in that environment who might be able to help you, an outside service provider, a third-party group. somebody else that you can call for support, because I'll tell you what, because that EMR touches every part of what you do all day, if it goes down or if you have a problem and you can't get an immediate solution, that can really monkey up the works of your operations for that day. So have as many alternatives as you can. A big thing that you want to do as a practice champion is limit the number of folks from within your site that are going to make outbound calls to those vendors. You do not want the lady at the front desk who is afraid of her computer, or the physician who is in the middle of his patient care appointment and trying to do his progress note. You don't want those people all calling out or outbound calling to the vendor trying to get somebody on the phone. I guarantee you all that will happen is that it doesn't land efficiently, and all of it turns into a stressful and occasionally loud communication gap. Instead, what you want to do is create a system where all of those folks contact the practice champion or champion choices to then deliver their request or their concern or their issue to that practice champion, and have that person contact the vendor and get back to them. That solves a number of problems. For one, in one way, they're able to then go back to their duties knowing that somebody is within the process of solving the problem. So practice champion now can move aside, make the phone call to the vendor, make a phone call to the IT department, make a phone call to the IT vendor, and begin troubleshooting that problem while the doctor has gone back to his progress note or her progress note, while the receptionist has gone back to confirming appointments with clients. Now the practice champion can take over and expedite, if you will, that troubleshooting effort. Demand attention from the vendors. One thing to keep in mind is that there is a triage system in the vendor community, all vendor communities. There's often a ticket system, meaning you've got to submit a ticket and then follow up. If you do not outline the urgency of your request, then you get moved to the bottom of the queue. So in the same way that a medical environment will triage patients in their waiting room, the same thing happens from these vendor site locations. If you do not indicate the urgency of your issue, then that vendor is going to put you at the bottom of the list. Make sure you are identifying your issue at its level of urgency. The other thing that the practice champion is going to want to do is document any and all issues. That person should be developing from the beginning of the process a step sheet for requests. So as I mentioned, rather than 27 different people in your site location outbound calling to the vendors, you want to develop a step sheet for requests. Step 1, identify the issue. Step 2, contact the practice champion. Step 3, practice champion will contact the vendor. Step 4, expect a call back from the practice champion or a contact from the practice champion within a certain period of time, or make an additional request. Those kinds of things. That step sheet is critical to make sure that the staff understands the routing to and from the practice champion. Create a cheat sheet for your staff. If you are the practice champion, you're going to want to create a sheet that helps the staff understand how to most easily identify their issue. From the get-go, if they can't log into the EMR for that day, did they forget their password? Have they checked to see if the internet is connected? Those kinds of steps. Basic cheat sheets for the folks, particularly the technically challenged folks. Basic cheat sheets for everybody next to their workstation. Tape to the back of the laptop for the physicians. Those basic cheat sheets are extremely helpful. Make a list of best responders. We mentioned this in the last slide. You want to make a list of folks at the vendor site locations as a practice champion who are the best people to talk to when there are problems. Prep a common questions list. As you implement and start to utilize the EMR, you will notice that a lot of questions come up over and over again. There's good news and bad news about that. The good news is if you've seen the question once, then the answer has already been established at some point. If you can this sounds like a very simple recommendation, but you'd be surprised how many environments do not do this and continue to call with the same problems over and over again. Prep this list and encourage your staff to do the same. If they have a question, write it down. When the solution comes through, write down the solution, periodically update that list, and set it with the cheat sheet near the workstation so they can quickly look at this question and answer list to see if maybe they don't need to contact you or the vendor for a solution. Another important thing to teach your staff and to know as a practice champion is to document the error. If there is an error message on the screen, most medical record solutions will throw up some kind of error message or error code when something goes awry. Documenting that error can cut down on the support time dramatically. So learn how to do a screenshot. If you don't know how to do a screenshot, Google it, very simple procedure, and then copy that screenshot into your ticket or send it to your support person to help troubleshoot. And then teach those skills to the staff. In addition to teaching the EMR, you want to teach folks how to best troubleshoot the circumstances. That is how a good practice champion will help manage that support situation. And the additional reason that you want to identify a practice champion or become a practice champion in your environment is to utilize this medical record solution to affect positive change in your work environment. When we're first learning, when we're first dealing with it, it just feels like a whole pile of problems and a whole pile of learning and a whole pile of stress. Once it's up and running and you start to utilize it at a high level, you're going to begin, particularly as a practice champion, to look for ways to affect positive change using this medical record solution. Start by identifying potential within the program to customize to better match what you feel is a good workflow in your environment. All EMRs will have some customization potential, whether that is modification of templates in daily operations, better links to outside medical devices, things of that nature. You want to identify good customization potential within that solution. So when you're not responding to trouble tickets, when you're not dealing with vendor calls, when you're not managing staff training, the additional thing that you can be doing as the solution grows and changes with your environment is to identify potential for customization, modify templates to meet your workflow, adjust procedures in your workflow to match better to that EMR efficiency. That is how you'll get the best utilization for that medical record. Create a timeline for your modifications. This is where the project management skills come into play. Make sure you create a timeline for the modification so that you're not overwhelming the staff, so that you're not confusing people by implementing change before anybody is ready. And another important thing that the practice champion can do, because they have developed this strong communication with the vendor and also with your staff, is to engage the staff in recommendations. The more you use the EMR, the more it will dawn on you that your whole workflow might function better if the EMR could do blank, fill in the blank. Engage the staff in their filling in of those blanks and make lists and take those lists to the user conferences or to the user groups online and start to, and that's going to help track back to the first bullet, which is helping you to identify what customization might be most beneficial to that environment. And finally, once you have engaged in some of these positive changes, make sure that you cross-train everybody. Make sure that you're cross-training everybody in the environment in any of the change that is happening from a customization standpoint. But this can also be applied to any changes that happen as updates from the vendor. As practice champion, you're going to be the person who says to the vendor, inform me of any changes, patches, modifications to the solution. They will, and subsequently you're going to need to make sure that everybody is keeping abreast of those changes and morphing along with the changes in the solution itself. And finally, the practice champion's entire job is to affect success in the utilization of that EMR. And they do that by managing it for its efficiencies. Identify the support challenges, prepare good support procedures, create a system, as we discussed. They will train aggressively and often themselves, the practice champions, of course, because that is one of their lead list items in their job expectations. But then also carrying that training out to the applicable staff people and being able to carve out portions of it based on their understanding of your organizational workflow. They can then take that broad level of training and target it to the folks within that medical environment in such a way that they are going to more efficiently utilize that training to engage in a better understanding from the entire staff. Managing expectations, I say this frequently, my staff would remark on this. I say this with a lot of sympathy for the medical environments that we work with. Manage expectations. When an EMR comes into play in this environment, in any medical environment, the expectations can be wide and varied depending upon who is talking about this topic. The physicians themselves might be looking forward to, for instance, a meaningful use capture back, financial incentive. They may be looking toward higher efficiency from their staff people or being able to utilize their staff in better ways. All of those things are possible utilizing this EMR, but they may not all happen right away. So by engaging a practice champion, that person can have a better understanding of how and when some of these benefits of the EMR will actually reflect in day-to-day operations. Customize to reduce issues, as we just mentioned in the prior slide, very, very important aspect of the practice champion's position, and staying informed. Not everybody in a medical environment is going to have time or really should have the access to the vendor in order to stay fully informed about what this product is doing from a change standpoint, from an improvement standpoint. You want to make sure that the practice champion is the person outlined to do that for everyone else and to come back and deliver that information to the rest of the staff. So to sum up this presentation, what I would like to do is to encourage everyone in this listening audience to feel free to submit additional questions to my staff at my site. info@emrapproved.com is a great place to submit questions. We will also follow up with an email post-presentation here, and at that point, feel free to respond with a request for a recording of this session. Feel free to request additional information from my Formed Pro Network staff regarding our project management training for potential practice champions, for our practice champion outline, that sort of thing. We are more than happy to answer your questions around this program and this presentation as it relates to identifying a practice champion. But you definitely, if you are implementing a medical record, I cannot stress enough how important it is to carve out, identify, empower, and train somebody internally to help spearhead and wrap their arms around this aspect of your day-to-day operations, this large aspect of your day-to-day operations. I'm looking to see if there are any immediate questions in my chat box here. The answer to, will we have a printed version? Yes. And are there additional resources that we can provide for post-implementation support, training, and solutions? Yes. Handful of questions there regarding that. So you can expect after this presentation in a moment to receive an email confirmation of your attendance and some additional information regarding the presentation. We will also send you a link to this presentation so that you can watch it again or forward it on to other colleagues. We appreciate your attendance. We thank you for participating in the Learning Lunch seminars through EMRapproved.com, and we hope that you will attend again next month. Thank you very much.